Hello and welcome to Midnight's Murmurs. Please consider using headphones for the best listening experience. Let me know what you think about tonight's tale in the comments. Like and subscribe for more creepy stories. I moved into the manor owned by my university's founder. The walls are starting to bleed. Part 1. Being accepted into Westcroft University was one of the best and worst things that has happened to me. It was my dream school, one where 95% of all graduates land successful music gigs. Unfortunately, due to its reputation, the tuition was a nightmare, making even the thought of living in the dormitories an unrealistic option. I had to look for off-campus options, but due to my late application, I found out too late that the most convenient ones are usually the first to go, so the pickings were slim. Stressed and frustrated, I sat on the steps leading to the campus. Though my heart clenched at the possibility, I could only think of one option left, and that was to drop out. Before I could wallow in self-pity, my eyes drifted over to the campus directory. A large wooden bulletin board with various flyers and posters plastered all over it. The papers billowed in the wind, torn and crumbled at the edges. That was when something caught my eye. The paper looked ancient, yellowed, crumpled, like something torn from a forgotten will. The text was written with a brilliant hand, each letter painfully deliberate, each word a perfect, neat line. Housing available, roommate needed. Large home with many rooms. Prices start at $500. Inquiries can be sent to 15 East Lake Drive. That was the address of the Holloway Manor. The building was owned by the Holloways, the family that established and supported the school financially. With so many buildings named after them, it's puzzling why their living quarters were accessible to outsiders. My first instinct was to assume it was a scam, but desperation and a bit of optimism drove me to follow up on this ad anyway, just to make sure. The trek wasn't the shortest, but it was also serene, as it went through a more natural path, giving me a great view of the lake. It was an impressive sight, huge and crystal blue, with water so clear you can see everything at the bottom. Despite its size, the lake was barren, no fish, no plants, not even insects. Looming at the far edge, casting its reflection across the glassy water, was the manor. I stood in awe at the sheer size of this thing. It looked ancient, like it was from the turn of the 20th century. The condition left much to be desired, with cracked, rotting wood, moss, and ivy growing over every surface, and chipped paint. A splotch of black on the side of the building caught my attention, which I recognized as the remnants of a fire. I knew I should have been scared, or at the very least, unnerved by the sight of this place. But instead, I found it fascinating. I guess the artist in me has a strange admiration for all things eerie. I took a deep breath, my heart racing with both excitement and a tinge of trepidation. This could either be the solution to my problems or a complete waste of time. I made my way up the steps leading to the front door. There was no doorbell, just a brass knocker in the center of the frame that looked like it was one bad tug away from crumbling. I didn't want to break the thing and have them sue me for the door, so I decided to just knock. I waited. The rustling leaves of the greenery around me drew my attention to the tree that seemed to be closing in on the property. It encased the house, wrangled branches reaching out like desperate arms to prevent any ray of sunlight from peeking through. Noon might as well be dusk for this place. As I leaned in to get a better look at the gnarled wood, I noticed that it had a distinct shade of crimson. I was by no means an expert on flora, but I didn't think that was a natural color. Must have been a rich people thing, I concluded. Hello. I was so entranced by the surrounding forest that the simple word was enough to cause me to flinch. Turning around, I saw a sunken blue eye peering from behind a crack in the door. I couldn't tell much about the girl on the other side, as the inside seemed pitch black. All I could see was her right eye, the corner of her chapped lips, and a set of pale fingers curled tightly around the door frame. Her skin was nearly translucent, faint blue veins webbed just beneath the surface. Her hair, long and blonde to the point of white, spilled over half her face like ink bleeding through paper. Speaking of, the girl seemed to have vanished, the sounds of shuffling coming from the room next over. She emerged holding a tray with 2 cups of tea, which she placed on the coffee table. "Please sit down," she said softly, and I complied. As I sat, I noticed her eyes darting from my face to the chair. Her delicate fingers pushed the ceramic teacup closer to me, and I took a look at the contents inside. The brew was a dark gray color with hints of green that gave off the faint smell of the sea. The sulfuric scent made my nose twitch, with a faint undertone of rust. I took a sip of the tea and found it to have a similar metallic tang, along with a texture that made the liquid cling to the sides of my mouth. It was strange and unusual, but I didn't want to seem rude. I forced myself to swallow it down, trying not to grimace too hard at the taste. I felt a lump form in the back of my throat, and for a second, I thought that I was going to throw up. Instead, I managed to choke out, "Thank you. Nothing like a cup of strong tea to get the day started." "What kind of leaves did you use anyway?" The girl didn't respond. She was staring at me, her expression unreadable. After a moment of silence, she finally spoke. "Oh, mint, I think." Her voice came out raspy and strained, like she hadn't used it in a century. Setting down the cup of hopefully not fatal tea, I extended my hand to her. "By the way, I'm Julian. Nice to meet you." It took her a second to process the gesture, and when she did, she placed her thin fingers into mine and gave a weak handshake. Her cold digits felt like ice in my hand. "My name is Eden," Eden murmured, before quickly adding on Holloway. "It's nice to meet you too, Julian." Another period of silence. She didn't seem all that great at keeping conversations alive, but that wasn't a big deal to me. "So, Eden," I began, leaning forward in the chair, "are you a student at Westcroft?" No, I'm not currently pursuing higher education. I am homeschooled, so to speak," she replied, her voice still soft, yet more confident and articulate than before. "Anyone else living here?" She shook her head. "Really? Isn't this house a bit big for just one person? She shrugged her shoulders. This wasn't going anywhere. Any competitors, I have to fight for the spot. No, Eden finally spoke. You're the first to respond. I've had it up for a year now. Pity stabbed at my heart. It sounded like she was lonely. Considering how awkward she was, the poor thing must have had trouble socializing. Well, don't worry, I gave her a comforting smile. I'm here now, and I'd like to be your new roommate. She gave me a strange look, like a deer in headlights. Are you sure? You don't want a tour? She asked. I laughed at her response. It was cute how much she underestimated the desperation of the average college student. Listen, I'm not exactly in a position to be picky. You seem like a lovely girl, and the price is perfect. It just needs a little fixing up, but I can handle that. I grinned at her. She didn't respond, but the faintest of smiles tugged at the corners of her lips. I took that as a sign that I'd won her over. It's $500 a month, right? Yes. Eden paused, dark eyes searching the sky for the answer. I can lower it, 200, if you're comfortable. I stared at her, dumbfounded. She was already selling herself short, and now she was willing to lower the price even further. This was too good to be true, but I didn't want to take advantage of her kindness. Then again, I was in a tight spot, and 200 a month was practically a steal for such a large place. Are you sure? I thought 500 was already too low. I mean, look at this house. It's huge. Are you sure you can afford to go that low? Money isn't a concern. This is my family's estate. Right, the Holloways, I noted, eyebrows furrowed in thought. Then why do you need a roommate? The rim of the cup stopped a hair short of her lips. She hesitated. Her eyes flitted to the floor. It gets lonely. Here, alone. The words fell from her lips in a soft whisper, clattering and disjointed. That was all the explanation I needed. All right, guess that's that then. I clapped my hands together. I'll move in as soon as possible. That seemed to make her happy, because the ghost of a smile returned to her lips, and the faintest hint of blue crept onto her pale cheeks. I am gonna be playing a lot of music. Is that gonna be? Music is fine, she answered a little too quickly. You can play whenever you want. The house tends to keep sounds in. The walls are thick. I won't hear much. And I like music. Awesome, I beamed, standing up and extending my hand for another shake. Making sure not to accidentally crush the bones in her hands into dust by putting too much force, I gave her a firm shake. Looking forward to rooming with you, Eden. She didn't say anything, just watched me with that almost smile as I stood up and walked to the door. I waited by the entrance, giving her a chance to see me off, but Eden just continued to blink, a slight tilt in her head. Right, I cleared my throat. I'm gonna go back to the campus to grab my things. It's not much, just a few bags and a suitcase, but I'll be back by tomorrow morning. Okay, she repeated. I waited for a few more moments to see if she'd say anything else, but after a solid minute of her doing nothing but blinking at me, I decided to take my leave. She was a little weird, but if bad tea and a staring problem was the worst I was going to get, I was pretty sure I was set. It was dusk when I left, and the smell of the lake was overwhelming. Though the aftertaste of the tea remained, The sight of the lake distracted me. The sun was just starting to set, painting everything in a warm glow that contrasted heavily with the cold air. I wouldn't mind seeing this sight every time I returned home from a tiring day at school, I thought. The next day, I quickly packed up all my belongings, bid my goodbyes to overpriced takeout and drab, concrete walls, and made my way back to the manor. I didn't even reach the first step before the door swung open with a swift yet grating creak. Out came Eden, dressed in the same clothing from yesterday, hands clasped politely in front of her. The ends of her lips twitched up periodically, as if she were having difficulty maintaining a smile. She leaned forward, yet never made the effort to ever step foot outside. "You're back," Eden stated. "Well, of course," I grinned, lugging my suitcase up the stairs. "You can't get rid of me that easily." Her eyes widened, and I could see her hands tense, their grip tightening. "Who? I don't want to get rid of you. I'd never do that." The way she said it should have been endearing, but I couldn't help but feel like she was trying to persuade me more than anything else. "Oh, no, I didn't mean it literally," I chuckled, waiting for her to move aside so I could come through. But she didn't. She just stood there, staring at me. "It's a joke, an expression. I just mean that I'm not leaving." Her shoulders relaxed, and she finally stepped aside to let me in. "Anyway, mind showing me my room?" "Right, of course," she mumbled, "right this way." Eden guided me towards the living room where the two of us had spoken. "This is the living room. You've already seen it. There's a bathroom to the left." "You haven't," I nodded, making mental notes. "And that's the kitchen. That's where the food is." As she showed me around, I couldn't help but notice that the curtains were drawn, keeping most of the natural light out. Not only that, but there weren't any lights on, which made the house feel even more eerie. "A little dark in here. Not a fan of the light," she turned abruptly, pausing near one of the thick curtains. Gingerly, she pulled it aside, letting what little light there was spill through. Branches obscured the view, giving the whole thing an even more haunted look. "Ah. Well, you can keep them closed if you want." With a curt nod, she pulled it closed and continued. That was when I spotted a door off to the side, tucked away in a corner. "What's in there?" I asked, gesturing to the door. She looked at it, and her expression changed. "Basement. It's messy. I haven't gone down in a while. Most certainly houses insects and critters. Probably mold and fungus. Maybe even rot. It's very old." She spoke with that strange cadence of hers, each word rolling off her tongue like a pebble falling from a cliffside. "You don't want to see it." It wasn't a suggestion, nor even a command. It was just a fact. "Fair enough," I shrugged, following behind her again. She led me up the stairs, and I found myself standing in a hallway. It was long and narrow, with doors lining both sides. "This is your room. Third door on the right," she said, stopping in front of my room. She opened it for me, and I was greeted with a fairly simple interior. Or, at least, it looked simple from a cursory glance. It contained a twin-sized bed, a wooden desk, and a modest closet, things every bedroom should have. But the more I looked at it, the more its oddities emerged. Beige walls with peeling wallpaper, and a ceiling that felt several inches too short. I approached the desk, tracing my fingers over its surface to find it, surprisingly, not dusty. Eden must have cleaned it, or at the very least wiped it down. Still, the wood had nicks and cuts, the drawers were a little crooked, and the hinges were rusted. However, all of that paled in comparison to the sight. The large windowsill overlooked the lake, giving a spectacular view of the clear, still waters, as well as the surrounding forest. I could feel my breath being taken away as I gazed out at the scenery. It was stunning. "Do you like it?" Her voice broke me out of my reverie. I turned to her with an excited grin. "Eden, it's perfect," I said, placing my luggage down and walking over to her, still facing the window. "I love it. Great view as well. I'm glad those branches aren't covering it like they do the rest of the place," I joked, turning to face her. My smile immediately faltered when I saw the look in her eyes. Wide, anxious, as if I'd just said something that had deeply unsettled her. Her eyes flicked to the water, but only for a second. Then, like a guilty habit, she looked away, condemning herself from the view. "What's wrong?" I asked, concerned. "Is there a problem? Was it the branch joke?" "Sorry, that wasn't. I'm glad you like it," Eden suddenly interjected, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "I'll leave you to unpack." And with that, she turned and left, leaving me alone in the room. I stared at the open door for a moment before turning to my luggage and getting to work. A few hours later, I had unpacked everything, and I was sitting on the bed, looking out the window. It was so peaceful, and the view was so calming. The type of scenery perfect for inspiring art. In fact, a burst of creativity surged through me right then and there, and I opened the case to my violin, my pride and joy. Cradling it like an infant, I took a seat by the window, letting the natural light wash over me. Setting the bow atop the strings, I took a deep breath and drew the bow. A jarring twang cut through the air, and I physically flinched. That's not right. I had just tuned it to perfection the day before, and yet here it was, no different than the sound of nails on a chalkboard. Bowing the other strings yielded similar results, each one a high-pitched screech. It was as if the strings were broken. It didn't sound like when they were untuned, or if I had the wrong note, either. The sounds were clear and crisp, just wrong. Like the walls rejected the note and spat it back at me with disdain. I rested the violin on my lap and let out a slow, frustrated breath. I didn't want to believe it was damaged, not this violin, not the one that had been with me through every recital, every sleepless night of practice. So I stood, brushing the dust from my pants, and made my way to the door. The second I cracked it open, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Eden was standing inches from the door frame, the shadows of the manor casting her in a ghastly light that seemed to make her sunken features sink even further. Hey, Eden. Good evening. I chuckled, hoping that my voice wasn't shaking. "Good evening," she echoed, her head tilted to the side. "Is something wrong? You don't sound happy." "It's nothing, just my violin's been acting up." I have no idea what's wrong with it. I raised the back of my finger to my lips, gently biting the knuckle. Her blue eyes trailed to the act before rising back to meet my gaze. "Oh, yes, It doesn't respond well to music. The house, that is. I think it might have absorbed most of the noise. Absorbed? What do you mean? I asked. The structure is not normal. Hollow, I think. Doesn't respond well to sounds. Especially music. The living room is the best place to play, I believe. It's large enough for the sound to travel freely. Huh, okay. Thanks, Eden. She didn't say anything. She just stared. It wasn't a threatening stare, nor was it malicious. Did you need anything else? No, I'm fine, she replied. If you want to see if the living room is better, then I could join you. It took me a moment that this was her roundabout way of asking to hear me play. I smiled and nodded, taking the violin with me. Sure, sounds great. She smiled back, albeit a bit awkwardly, and we made our way down the stairs. The living room was still empty, with the curtains drawn. I took a seat on the couch and set the violin on my lap. So, what would you like me to play? I asked, looking at her. Eden placed a few logs of wood into the fire pit, striking 2 pieces of flint together until a small fire roared. She didn't even look at me when she answered, just kept her eyes fixed on the fire. Something pleasant would be nice. Pleasant, right? I had a few pieces in mind, and the bow touched the strings. The melody filled the room, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The house didn't distort the sound in the living room, like Eden had suggested. Well, not entirely at least, though not as loud. I could still hear the notes being thrown back at me. A tinny and faint imitation of the original. The music was clear and crisp, and I could feel the vibrations of the notes travel up my arm. The warm light of the flames danced on the instrument, and the orange-tinted glow of the room gave the whole thing a nostalgic feel. It was as if the whole room had been bathed in the soft glow of a memory. The music flowed from my fingertips and filled the room, filling every nook and cranny. When the piece was done, I lowered my violin and looked at Eden, who was staring at the bonfire intently, eyes wide and unfocused. That was when I saw the tears rolling down her cheeks like dewdrops on a leaf. They left a dark trail across her pale cheeks, nearly getting caught in the concave dips of her sunken face. Eden, are you okay? And no. Well, yes. Eden cleared her throat, looking away and rubbing her cheeks with her sleeve. I don't have the privilege of listening to music all that often, and I was simply moved by the piece. You're a very talented musician. Thank you for that. Though her words were genuine, I couldn't help but feel like there was more to the tears. She was hiding something, I knew it. But I didn't want to pry. I chuckled, shaking my head. It was my pleasure, really. Thank you for allowing me to play. If you ever want another performance, I'd be more than happy to oblige. Oh, I wouldn't want to impose on you. Trust me, there's no reward better for a musician than a happy audience. I grinned, and she paused, eyes flicking across my features, looking for something. When she didn't find it, that bittersweet smile returned to her face, the ends of her lips not reaching her face, and her eyebrows crinkling. Thank you, Julian. She stood up once more and put out the fire. All the life and color that was once in the living room was snuffed out in an instant, swallowed by the dark. With a gentle bow, she ascended up the flight of stairs in a manner that was far too quiet for someone in such an old house, leaving me by my lonesome. The curtains hung like carcass shrouds. The floors creaked with each momentary shift in weight, and the house groaned as if the building itself was alive. In the dark, the appeal of the house's eerie nature had worn away, and the fear was seeping back in. Even pushing myself onto my feet released a cacophony of protesting squeaks that made me jump. Hoping that Eden was right about the place being soundproof, I tiptoed across the living room, making my way to the stairs. Just before I could reach the flight of steps, I caught sight of something in my peripherals. Perched on one of the many shelves was a small framed picture. I peered closely, examining the photo. It was faded and yellow, nearly a century old. The frame was a black, elegant piece with a silver trim. The photo itself seemed to be a family shot, positioned outside the manor itself. Only, it was a lot cleaner, and the massive oak tree that clung to the structure like a parasite was missing. While I didn't recognize any of the faces, I did notice a man in the middle, older in age, yet possessing a certain dominance that made it clear he was the patriarch. He stood with his back straight and his arms crossed, his face set in a stern expression. What was most strange about his appearance, a terrible scar that spanned across the left side of his face, skin peeled off to reveal his teeth and eye. A war hero, or just the victim of some horrible accident. The rest of the family looked just as grim, expressionless, almost mannequin-like. No one smiled, not even the children. Something about their faces unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain, and I decided it'd be best to return to my room and get a good night's rest. I needed to be well rested for my classes in the morning. As I ascended the rickety stairs, each creak sharper than the last, I found myself thinking back to something Eden had said, something that hadn't struck me until now. Hollow, she had called it. I was by no means an architect, but there was no way that a place of this size and age could be hollow, could it? That sounded like a structural nightmare. Surely, it would have collapsed under its own weight with how little care was put into it. I stopped in front of my room, the hallway lit by the dim light of the moon that poured in through my window, and took a moment to examine the walls. They were old, sure, and there were cracks and holes in them, but the foundation seemed solid enough. Curious, I pressed my hand against the wallpaper and pushed. It felt like a wall, of course. As I chastised myself for being so paranoid, however, the wall gave out a little under my palm. A faint squelch could be heard, and I felt something warm secrete into my hand. I wrenched the limb back, my heart rattling. A thick, viscous fluid clung to my skin, sticky and dark in the low light. Panic seized me, and I stumbled clumsily from room to room, trying to decipher which one was the bathroom. Once I found it, I slammed the door open and flipped the lights on, nearly blinded by the sudden brightness. It wasn't water coating my hands, nor mud, nor anything else that could have made any semblance of sense. It was blood, and it was warm. Part 2. After the incident in the hallway, I immediately went to bed and willed myself to forget about it. My mind must have been playing tricks on me. That was it. I was just seeing things. I'd been under a lot of stress lately, and moving to someplace new probably just added to the mix. That was all. It was just in my head, and it worked. The next few days passed with little issues. Sure, I had some difficulty sleeping, but of course I would. It was a new place, after all, and getting used to the barely audible groans echoing throughout the house's infrastructure was going to take a little while. Eden was also a bit weird, and I'd catch her staring at me from time to time, but it was nothing too crazy. But that peace didn't last for long. Just the other day, I had woken up extra early as a nightmare cut through the fog of sleep. A common occurrence for me that seemed to be exacerbated by the new environment. It was still dark out, the sun just barely making its presence known, and I decided to grab a cup of water. In the kitchen, I found Eden sitting by the table, a teacup in front of her. She looked up when she heard me enter and smiled. "Julian," she said in that quiet voice of hers, a hint of surprise in her tone. "Good morning. I didn't expect you to be up so early." It was only then that I realized she was wearing pajamas, a simple white gown that seemed almost ethereal in the early dawn light. It was hard to spot her in anything besides that same frilly blue dress from the first day, so it was a nice sight. "Yeah, I had trouble sleeping, nightmares," I admitted with a sheepish smile. "What about you?" she hummed, bringing the rim of the cup to her lips. "I don't sleep much." "Really?" My eyebrows shot up. "Isn't that, like, super unhealthy?" "I'm not tired," Eden shrugged her shoulders, and I found the comment exceptionally hard to believe, judging from the bags dragging her eyes down. "Right," I trailed off, not sure what to say next. I wanted to ask her if she had nightmares too, but that was a little personal, wasn't it? "So, did you want me to make you some breakfast?" Eden looked at me with those wide blue eyes. "I can make it myself, Julian. You're my tenant. You don't have to." "Well, at the very least, let me help. In return for the tea, you know." I gave her a big smile, and she stared at me. It wasn't long before she gave a single nod. "Okay." And so I helped her make breakfast. I didn't really have to, honestly. Eden moved with an efficiency that was surprising, considering how sluggish she looked. I'd never seen someone chop vegetables so quickly and evenly, and the eggs were cooked to perfection. "I'm curious, where do you get all your ingredients from? Don't see you leave the house much, and there aren't any cars anywhere," I asked as I washed a potato, bringing it close to me to see if there was anything off about it. Eden paused mid-egg beating, and I could have sworn the whites turned just a little murkier. She must have noticed my stare, because she quickly set it down and took the potatoes from me, placing them in a pot and filling it with water. It was only after she brought the wooden spoon back to her hand that she answered. "I go out sometimes, usually in the early morning, when there's less of a crowd." Living with Eden allowed me to pick up on a few of her more obvious habits, and one of them was avoiding looking in the same direction as me when lying. Sure, her eyes never seemed to focus on anything in particular, but she made an effort to face away from me whenever she told a white lie. I wasn't going to pry when it was something clearly personal, but food safety was another matter. "You're not getting them from the lake, are you?" I joked, hoping she'd laugh. She didn't. Instead, she tilted her head at me, and then at the water, her eyes narrowing. "That's silly, Julian. Vegetables, eggs, and fish don't belong together. You're funny." Her response was delivered so flatly that I wasn't sure if she was being sarcastic or not. Yeah. I think the vegetables are ready." I pointed at the pot, and Eden hummed in understanding. We continued to cook breakfast, and I tried not to think too much about where the food came from. As Eden set the table and placed the plates on it, however, I noticed she had given herself a much smaller portion. "Eden, you sure that's enough?" "Yes, I don't eat much," she said, taking a seat. I took the chair across from her and looked at the plate of food. It was, I don't know, weird, like buying food from another country and seeing how different their cuisine is. Not bad, per se, but odd. Scooping a forkful, I raised it to my mouth and took a bite. The eggs were bland, and the potatoes were undercooked. Not exactly great, but still edible. "You know, I can pick up some groceries," I gently offered, not wanting to outright tell her cooking was bad. That would be nice. I had half expected her to reject my help, but instead, she readily agreed, edging on the verge of relief. I don't know what most people eat nowadays. I'm a bit out of touch. It was as close to an acknowledgement of her subpar cooking as I was going to get, and I was satisfied with that. Yeah, of course. I'd be more than happy to, Eden. As we washed the dishes, I couldn't help but let out some of the curiosity that had been building inside me. "So, you mentioned you're homeschooled, but I've never seen any tutors or anyone else for that matter. Is your family busy or something?" She stared at me for a moment, her eyes searching my face. "I'm self-taught," she said after a while. "And yes, my parents are busy." That was strange. Considering how rich this family seemed to be, wouldn't they at least have a private tutor? Or even just an adult in the house to supervise? Right, business and all that. It's weird though. I've never heard of the Holloway family before, yet you guys own one of the most prestigious schools in the world. "What industry are you guys in?" I asked, genuinely curious. Eden stopped washing the plates, her body tensing up and her eyes widening. She didn't respond. "I mean, everyone takes about the Honorable Holloways and how much they've done for the town, but I've only heard of them by name. I tried asking around on campus, and nobody seems to really know who they are. You guys must be really private." Not even Google. The plate shattered in her hands, shards of broken porcelain scattering across the sink and clinking against the bottom. Her hands were dripping with blood, thick red lines running along the smooth skin, yet she didn't seem to react. "I'm sorry," Eden murmured, her voice trembling. I'm sorry." The liquid seeped with the remains of the food, overtaking the egg whites and forming a pink, frothing mess. I panicked, countless words forming in my head, yet none escaping. Eventually, I managed to shake myself out of my stupor and grabbed a towel, pressing it to her palms. I was too scared to look at her face. "Hey, it's okay, don't worry. I was just making conversation. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, okay? God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to pry." Her hands were shaking in mine. "Come on, let's sit down for a second." I brought her to the living room, the two of us taking a seat on the couch. I held her hands and pressed the towel firmly onto the cuts, trying to stop the bleeding, and I could feel her body tremble. Hey, it's okay," I said softly, trying to reassure her. My teeth grit together. How could I have been so careless? I knew Eden was sensitive, and yet I kept asking her questions like an insensitive oaf. "Where is the—" My words died as I looked at her pale, shivering hand. More precisely, the blood seeping through the rag. At first glance, it looked like regular, normal blood. But the way it seeped out of the wound was more akin to sap, and the smell, metallic and rusty. She wrenched her hands back, covering the wound with a towel. "Sorry, I'm fine. I'll be fine. I have bandages in the bathroom." Eden stood, walking towards the stairs. "Eden, wait. Let me help you. You're hurt." I chased after her, grabbing her by the wrist. She flinched at the touch and tried to pull away. "No, it's fine. I'm fine. You have school. Go." With one final tug, she pulled herself free from my grasp, a feat barely worth commending, as I had barely applied any pressure in the first place. I stood there, frozen, as I watched her climb the steps, each one releasing a drawn-out creak. I think that's about when issues started to surface, although I don't think it was related. It's not like my sleep was getting better before our little spat. No, it was getting worse. I stopped keeping track of how many hours I slept. Some nights I'd keep my eyes closed for a solid 4, maybe 5 hours, and look at the clock to see 3 minutes had passed. And other times the entirety of a night would pass in a blink. I was constantly exhausted. A full night's rest felt like the pipe dream of a madman, and I was starting to lose weight. And the groans, those damned groans, they kept me up at night, and they never ceased. They got louder and more frequent, like churning, like bubbling. I hated it. I absolutely despised it. No matter how I tossed and turned, it never went away. And Eden didn't help either. In fact, I barely saw her anymore. It didn't help that I didn't have the strength to chase her around the labyrinth that was the manor. When she did see me, her eyes would fill with surprise at the state of my appearance, before something akin to guilt or shame flickered in her eyes. Then she'd leave, and I wouldn't see her for days on end. As the days went on, the bags under my eyes grew heavier and heavier, and I was starting to lose hope that I would ever get a good night's rest again. I was trapped in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the walls move. I couldn't stay here any longer. I figured one night, when the sounds grew especially loud, my tired eyelids struggled to keep open, yet they avoided the siren call of slumber. A guttural rumbling rang out, the same kind that had haunted me and my sleep for the last however many days it's been. With the last of my strength, I pushed myself out of bed and stumbled to the window, nearly tripping over the violin case on the way there. The branches that previously avoided the window were now encroaching on the glass so tightly I could see it bend ever so slightly. Not a single ray of moonlight dared to pierce through the canopy, leaving the world outside my window as black as an abyss. Another groan, this time closer. I struggled to the wall, eyebrows furrowed, frustration mounting. What the hell was making that sound? I pressed my ear to the wall and listened. There was a squelching sound, like water being squeezed through a sponge. The smell, the one that had accompanied the liquid from the wall and Eden's blood, was back, and stronger than ever. The pulse of my heart matched with the rhythmic thumping of the house, beating in tandem with the walls that seemed to shift with each throb. A migraine formed in the back of my head, and I raised a hand to clutch the spot. Anger and pain mixed into a concoction of pure, unbridled hatred. My fingers dug into the dainty wallpaper, tearing into the layers before yanking it back. The sound that followed wasn't the one of paper ripping. No, the sound was more organic, the noise of flesh being pulled from the body, the wet sound of a carcass being split open. And beneath it wasn't wood nor drywall. It was a throbbing mass of sinew and flesh. Blue veins the size of my arm ran along the walls like a network of rivers, all pointing to the door. The moment I let go of the wallpaper to stumble back in a mix of terror and pure revulsion, the beige material sealed itself shut. What remained of the tear was a brown, rust-colored pigment, like a scab. I scampered for the hallway, nearly tripping over my feet every other step. Had my stomach not been empty, I would have thrown up at the sight, but the best I managed was dry heaving. I gripped another section of the wall, peeling the wallpaper back to reveal the same pulsing, twitching flesh underneath. The veins led downstairs. Of course, if this house was as organic as I thought it was, then that meant it had a core, as all living creatures do. And it was downstairs. I descended the steps, my hands shaking. I paid no mind to the loud creaks that echoed with each step. I didn't care if Eden heard. I just needed to make the groans stop. Once I reached the first floor, I continued to tear at the wallpaper, the veins guiding me across the living room, through the kitchen, and finally stopping in front of the door Eden had told me was the basement. It was the only room she forbade me from entering, and I had respected her wishes thus far. But I needed to know what was in there. I needed to see. I needed to put an end to this madness, to this torture. I tried the handle, but it was locked. Of course, Eden would have made sure to lock it. I took a few steps back, eyeing the door. Breaking it down would make far too much noise, but in my state, logic and reason were already a far-flung dream. I took a running start and slammed my shoulder against the wood, causing the hinges to squeal in protest. Again and again, I threw myself at the door until my arm was numb and sore. The wood was starting to give way, and I could hear the lock rattling. With one last push, the door swung open, and I found myself at the top of the stairs, looking down at the basement. It was evident that no one was supposed to see beyond this, as the thin veil of a well-kept house had fallen away and revealed the rotting carcass of the interior. A moldy, pungent scent wafted through the air, and I could see the floorboards below me were cracked and splintered. The red mass clung to the walls and ceiling like roots on a tree, and its deep, crimson coloring reminded me all too well of the crooked branches that embraced the house. The air was thick with copper, rust, and something distinctly sweet, like syrup left in the mouth of a corpse. The mere act of breathing felt like inhaling poison, and the damp, humid atmosphere clung to my skin. The wooden steps moaned under my feet as I descended, each one groaning beneath my weight, threatening to give way. The darkness was overwhelming, swallowing the short beam of light my phone could provide, and the smell of rot grew stronger with each passing moment. Its honesty and unabashed putridity was almost refreshing in the wake of the facade of a respectable manor. But that did little to make me feel better. My bare foot sank into the floor, wet sludge coating my skin and clinging on as I took a step, leaving numbingly cold prints wherever I went. I pointed the light down, grimacing at the flesh that squirmed and pulsated under the sole of my feet. So fixated on avoiding any particularly deep pools, I neglected to look up at the rest of the room. And that's when I nearly bumped into the wall. Yet, as the light rose, I wasn't met with the red mass that I had expected. Feet, red, sinewy flesh that erupted from the wall haphazardly, attached to legs that were attached to a torso. And at the top, the head of a man. I fell back, my phone dropping light side up and casting a shadow of the corpse. Its arms were spread wide, as if being crucified. All across its body, tendrils of meat and veins had spread, engulfing the room completely. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to puke, but I didn't have the strength to do anything. All I could do was stare, wide-eyed and terrified, at the sight before me. Then I looked at his face. Though lacking skin and eyes, the scar across his face and the distinctive nose gave him away. This was the man in the photo, the patriarch of the Holloway family, the founder of the university. But that was impossible. He should have been dead a long time ago. But what I was staring at wasn't a corpse. No flies, no maggots, no rot. Worse yet, it was moving. Not with intent or purpose, but rather with a natural rhythm, as if it were alive. Breathing. Then I heard footsteps. My head whipped around, and I saw her. Eden stood at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes fixed on me, wide, unblinking, and full of dread. Her hands clasped together, fingers fidgeting with each other. She didn't speak for a few moments, and neither did I. We just stared at each other, both unsure what to say. Finally, she stepped forward and yanked my arm, hoisting me up with surprising strength. I didn't resist. The cold shock of the revelation had drained all the energy I had, and I could barely move. She led me back upstairs, through the living room, and only when we reached the hallway leading to the exit did I find the willpower to pull away from her grip. Her run devolved rapidly until she was standing, back hunched, clutching her knees for support. Eden, I managed to sputter. What the hell is going on? Who is that? She didn't look up. Instead, she kept her head low, her long hair covering her face. You met my great-grandfather. I was not in the mood for her vague, cryptic answers. I grabbed her by the shoulders, spinning her around and forcing her to meet my gaze. Terror, shock, and guilt all swirled in her blue irises, and the sight of it almost broke me. Eden, I demanded, my voice low and firm, answer me. His name is Augustus. Augustus Holloway, she said, voice too steady, like she was reading off a plaque. A decorated war hero, World War I medals, honors, legacy. But he came back different, petrified of death. He was obsessed with living on, inspiring him to become the man he was. This university, the family, all were made with the intent of being remembered, yet it wasn't enough. She paused, her hands clenching into fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. He needed to live on in more than just the hearts and minds of the people. So he did something. I don't know what he did. I don't know. But it worked. He's alive. He's still alive. Her voice cracked, her words breaking down into barely coherent sentences. But he needs food, and my family provided. Servants, workers, employees. Sapped them of their essence. Fed them to him. And when there was no one left to feed on, we were next. My father, my grandparents, my cousins. And my mother, driven by despair, she plunged into the lake one day and never emerged. The only survivor was me. He knew he couldn't kill me, because then there would be no one left to keep him alive. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't put up that flyer just because I was lonely. I did it to feed him. My blood froze, and I pushed myself as far from her as possible, my back pressing up against the wall. You what? Eden didn't even have the decency to look me in the eyes. She just stared at her own palms, tears running down her face. Why did you do this? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But if I didn't, then I would die. Then nobody would be there to look after him. He's family, and family sticks together. I didn't have a choice. Her voice was trembling, her words barely more than a whisper. To hell with that, I yelled, slamming my fist against the wall. The quiet groan that echoed soon after only made me more furious. He's not your family, he's a monster. Why haven't you left already? I can't. You saw it, Julian. When I cut myself, that wasn't my blood. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being mine and became his. Genuine remorse and sorrow dripped from every syllable. I couldn't stand being alone anymore. I thought if I brought someone here, someone that he could feed off of instead of me, that I could have a friend. Just for a little bit, the folly of it all. She let out a weak, self-deprecating laugh. You need to leave. Right now. Stared at her, unsure what to say. I was angry, scared, and confused all at the same time. But the one thing that overpowered it all was sympathy. Maybe it was the fatigue. Maybe it was my bleeding heart. But in that moment, I couldn't find it in myself to hate her, no matter what she did. She was just a scared girl, trapped in a living nightmare. The only reason I was even here was because she was lonely and scared, because she wanted a friend. Eden, I can't just leave you here with that thing. I tried to reach for her, but she took a step away from me, shaking her head. No, that is my penance. You have to go now while you can. Eden turned her back to me and started walking away, her head hung low and her shoulders slumped. Just go, Julian, and please, never come back. My throat tightened, and I swallowed hard. I wanted to stay. I wanted to fight. I wanted to save this girl from her own family. But I knew that there was nothing I could do. I was weak and tired and scared. So I nodded. She practically shoved me outside while she went to collect my belongings, returning a few minutes later with a suitcase full of my clothes and a violin case. As she pushed them into my hands, I caught sight of her face, still twisted in anguish. My heart sank, and I opened my mouth to speak. But before I could say anything, she slammed the door shut, leaving me alone on the porch. The light of the moon cast an eerie glow on the house, and I couldn't help but feel as though the building itself was staring at me. I took one last look at the door before turning away and walking down the steps, my feet dragging against the ground. The lake that seemed still for my entire stay rippled gently, the reflection of the moon and stars dancing on its surface. And as if things couldn't get worse, I realized I had left my phone on the basement floor. I didn't have the courage to turn back, so I just walked to the campus, used one of the pay phones to call my parents, and returned home. The endless barrage of questions they had regarding my appearance and sudden return not even close to registering in my brain. The moment I reached my bed, my body finally gave out, and I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the likes of which I hadn't had in weeks. It was the best sleep I had in years, and if my mom hadn't woken me up at 5 in the afternoon, I was sure I would have slept for an entire day. I can't get the Holloway Manor out of my head. It's like Augustus has taken root in my mind, and I can't get rid of him no matter how hard I try. Eden is still inside there, slowly rotting in a house that has become a tomb. I need to go back, not just for her sake, but also for mine. My mind is plagued by nightmares. The house is calling to me, beckoning me closer, and I can't ignore it any longer.